ghouls and goblins, you've been good, so now it's time for a treat! Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. You've been good, but not good enough. So I'll only show you bloodthirsty Bats in Flight Les Paul Custom today. That's right, I found one for our Halloween viewing pleasure. These were Guitar Center limited edition exclusive guitars, and we just recently documented one of the purple acoustic models, where we learned a little bit about the history of these, but let's do a very quick recap. In 2018, there was a trans-black Bats in Flight acoustic model. It borrowed its elements from the Doves in Flight model that was first introduced in the year 1996. Basically, they took doves and happy trees and turned them into dead things and bats. And then in the year 2019, they followed that up with a Purple Burst acoustic version and introduced the Les Paul. Both of those absolutely gorgeous designs. However, for 2020, they introduced the Red Les Paul Custom, a red non-bursted acoustic, and a few Epiphone acoustics were also made that year. As of 2024, no more have been made, and it appears to have been an abandoned idea by Guitar Center, as made-to-measure requests have been made and were turned down. It's typically believed around 10 of each of the Gibson versions were created each year. And at the time, these were just kind of seen as gaudy, rather expensive things, like the Les Paul that we're looking at here sold brand new for $8,000. And that is quite a lot of money, but it's got a quilt maple top, it's got chrome hardware, we've got the really fun bat inlays, which is always fun to see this now on an electric guitar, as well as the acoustic within my collection. But to spice up your Les Paul, you also have a multi-piece flame maple neck. Now, unfortunately, it's a really dark red finish, and you don't have like a quilty back or anything like that, or sides. But it's certainly fun to have something additional onto these to make it a little bit more special than just some fancy inlays. Now, is the only difference between the two Les Paul models the color and the year of production? Not exactly. I still need to tear apart a purple one to know everything for sure. But as of right now, I can tell you the purple one is kind of like a Les Paul Ultima in the fact that it gets the additional abalone purfling along the binding. So it's got just that little bit of extra specialness to it, and that's what bumped it up to the Gibson Crimson division, whereas the later produced red one was just regular custom shop and did not have that additional fancy trim. They are both branded as Les Paul Customs though. The reason the purple Bats wasn't called an Ultima probably comes down to it wasn't fully chambered. Both models were advertised as regular 9-hole weight relief. Here's our proof that this one is not a Crimson division level. It's just got your regular Gibson COA. I think that's the biggest thing many people had against this one, is it was the exact same price as the Purple Crimson. Just not quite as fancy. The paperwork is filled out as a regular Les Paul Custom, but the COA does indeed say Bats. I know what you're thinking. Trogly, how did you find the Bats guitars? I've been looking forever. Well, I actually bought both of my Bats guitars from the guy who sold me that really cool NAMM Show 2019 SG with the awesome quilt top. A viewer of the show sent me a Facebook listing of the acoustic model and said, hey, I know you've been looking for the Les Paul, but hey, I found the acoustic. To which I said, wow, yeah, that is the purple one. I haven't seen one of those things for sale before. I might have to message the guy. But I asked the viewer if he'd be able to help me get it if I can't convince the guy to ship. And he said, unfortunately, Facebook was just sharing things that were 3 hours away from me. But I looked at the name of the seller, and yeah, sure enough, it's the exact same guy. And mainly tongue-in-cheek, I was like, hey, you got any of the Les Pauls? And he's like, I don't have the purple one. I missed it by an hour. He was referring to the only one that's ever came up for sale by Roadhouse Vintage. But he did buy the red one brand new from Guitar Center. So kind of a second place for me. If anybody has a purple one and you want to talk about it, I think it would be nice to complete the set. But I'm very happy to finally have these. But you might just be saying, hey, why did you just buy these things brand new if you liked them so much? Back then, it just seemed like they were going to continuously pump these things out every single year. And you got to remember, the guitar market was very different before that whole boom around 2021-ish. So these were just like right before things started to get really crazy. And to some guys, these are kind of gaudy and weird, which I can totally understand that they're not going to be for everybody. In fact, honestly, I think I like the acoustic model even better. But historically, this is also when Gibson is changing ownership. They're starting to bring the ebony fretboards back into production. That's late 2019 stuff. However, I'm seeing a lot of awful QC stuff, so how's that for spooky October month? We'll talk about that over on the workbench, which we'll head on over to now. inside our bloodthirsty friend here. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting serious deja vu vibes to the Dragon Les Paul Custom. The Halloween special episode, I believe 2 years ago, if you want to check that out. And I'll say pretty much the exact same thing about this one as I will that. It's a really cool double stain top. You get the red and then you get the darkness in between, but it does not work well for a quilt top because it, for whatever reason, makes the top not move that much, and it's such a dark hue. These need to be like faded out in the sun a little bit to really accentuate it, but I think that's what they were going for. Really dark, subtle vampire vibes. Let's go ahead and see what kind of pickups we're working with. Well, that's a custom bucker in the neck. And surprise, another custom bucker in the bridge. However, the custom buckers actually are an upgrade. Typically, this model would have the 490R 498T. As far as readings, the bridge is 8.03, the neck 7.94, and the middle for fun, 4. So here's a really good clear look at the neck. It is still 5 pieces. The spec sheet on these incorrectly states a 3-piece maple neck. I think they were just saying, oh, it's 3 pieces of maple. They didn't want to include the walnut, but this is technically a 5-piece neck. And it is a long neck tenon, as is common on a custom in this era. Here you can see where our maple top joins onto our mahogany body. You can see more of the same in our bridge pickup cavity. But this is not a specific year reissue custom, so it still has a Nashville style bridge with your posts in the body. Here's a look at the bridge itself, API branded on the back, and it is a full weight tailpiece. Obviously, you have to use a witch hat knob for a Halloween-inspired guitar. You don't find these on customs very often anymore, but it was actually the stock offering in the early 70s. That's just your regular bridge volume and tone, neck volume and tone. And another mildly special feature about this, they did not ship with pick guards installed. I didn't even see one in the case, which I guess I understand. If you're going to have a super quilty flame maple top, you kind of want to see it. But a Bats-inspired pick guard would have been kind of cool too. Look at the acoustic models, they pulled it off pretty good. It looks like the staining got a little bit too strong in some areas because it's kind of bled out onto the binding. Now, I'm not sure if we really consider that QC issues or is it just the stain over the years leaching into the binding. It's only apparent in a very few small areas, so I guess it's possible that they didn't mask off the binding good enough, because I really only see it in the cutaway, a little bit right here on the neck, and somehow we even got some red staining within the nut. The neck is stained the exact same way as the top, and you can see how it's kind of bleeding into the nuts lines right there too. But overall, I would say this thing cleaned up nicely. I listened to an hour and a half of Avenged Sevenfold. Seemed very apropos for this one. So moving on from our body, we've got that 5-piece maple neck we were talking about with our ebony fretboard. So these bats were just completely lifted off of the acoustic model, which is really cool because you get the double one at the 12th fret and then the singular ones. They're all just a little bit different. They have a lot of detail to them. This one's got his wings up. He's got them out. Here's kind of a somewhere in between and a flat. They're basically trying to capture them in flight as they go. So there's kind of a running theme here. That's why they called it Bats in Flight. But this was really disappointing to see on an $8,000 guitar. It's got chip out on the ebony fretboard right at the end where the nut is. And they at least could have filled it in with some ebony dust. Even by the inlays, you can see a lot of tooling marks within it. Probably because they were kind of hard to work with would be my guess. Once you have strings on it, is it overly apparent? No, I'm just being critical here. But if you notice, I did my super ultra polishing deluxe job on the frets, so it's looking much better now. That's your regular 12-inch fretboard radius in 24 3/4 inch scale. Our nut measure is 1.68 inches, increases to 2.08 by the 12th, and I measure 0.83 first fret neck depth, and 0.98 by the 12th. Here's a look at that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. It's a rounded C shape, but honestly, I would say it's a little bit on the thinner side, at least to what I was expecting. But now onto our beautiful headstock. The bats up here are also mother of pearl, just like on the fretboard. And like what we were saying on the acoustic model, these are going to look so cool once they get a little bit of yellowing age to them, that they definitely play around and dance in the light. And at first I thought there was a whole bunch of binding issues up here. But what it ended up being was just dried buffing compound, because there's quite an extended lipped ridge between where the binding is and the headstock's at. Like you can actually see a physical tooling mark like right here where it kind of dips down. Usually it's not that noticeable. But again, you gotta remember, this is brand new ownership of Gibson. They're slowly changing stuff. I'm not gonna say they're perfect today, but we were coming out of some relatively dark times, all things considered. Right here you can see what I'm talking about, that whiteness right here that looks like it's bubbling lacquer or something. Nah, you can scrape it off. Our truss rod's in great shape on this one, moves both directions perfectly. And the truss rod cover reads Les Paul Custom. Now that this thing's all strung back up and shiny again, I do like it more than when I had first unboxed it. Something about the really piercing chrome hardware being super reflective helps bring out the character of this one. But I also wanted to point out, this was a stand baby for the previous owner in a display case, so unfortunately, a little bit of yellowing to the edges of our headstock due to a non-nitro safe stand. Other than that, minus some polishing swirls and some QC type things, this thing's in phenomenal shape. Now, unlike the Dragon, this one does not have a quilty matching back, it's just regular mahogany. But now let's look inside our control cavity, which as far as I'm aware is the first time the internet has seen inside one of these. It's all Gibson branded pots, nothing too out of the ordinary. But we can at least confirm it's not chambered. Should be the 9-hole weight relief, which is what usual Les Paul Customs have. When you jump up to the year-specific reissues, that's when you get the solid bodies. But they didn't play with the binding or anything, it's just your regular 7-ply top and back. With a strap button down here, and one in your regular position. And just for fun, I popped off the toggle switch cover, although there's not much to see in there. And it's not like a special bats medallion, that would have been really cool. And your back plate cover is just black. And laying a little bat back here would have been cool. But this model does feature thin binding in the cutaway. You can just barely see your maple top there, it's all stained so dark. And now our gorgeous neck, that would just absolutely knock your socks off if it wasn't so dark. My favorite area on this and the Dragon Les Paul is always when it has like this type of wood grain underneath it. It just makes it look scaly and super cool. But again, you probably could lightly sun bleach this to get rid of some of the darkness if you really wanted to. And since most of these are kind of display pieces anyways, you might see that naturally occurring on some examples. But unfortunately, it's not like the Centipede Les Paul or any of the other ones with the cool decals. It's just the Gibson Custom one with regular Grover tuners. But your flameage continues all the way up here. Pretty cool serial number on this one, 000599. So Guitar Center probably ordered these around January, February, so they would be ready for around October-ish. So that's why they have pretty early serial numbers within the year. All said and done, this bat weighs 9 pounds, 3.1 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds.
kind of weird being spec'd out with custom buckers. It has insanely nice clean tones. Like it's meant for a bluesy jazz gig. It's just a little bit too spooky for it. I really love that middle position. Well, that was incredibly fun to play. This is a very interesting beast. These pickups actually bode really well for like classic rock, but they have a really nice warm sound to them, which isn't necessarily what I would normally think with a guitar dressed up with bats. You would almost imagine like some active EMG pickups in here, but for my case, I'm pretty happy with what they are. However, maybe like Gibson Dirty Fingers would have been a slightly better choice, as it just left me wanting maybe just a little bit more out of the dirty channels, but again, you can swap amps and do all that. Custom buckers are nothing to sneeze at, but I had an absolute blast playing, slightly appropriate songs for this guitar. Now, is it something I would probably play every single day? Maybe, but I think for most gigs, you'd probably prefer something a little bit more traditional. I'm so glad Guitar Center made these things happen, because they're just a lot of fun, and the fact that they're kind of uncommon and rare nowadays makes the thrill of the chase even more fun for me. So, next time we see bats, hopefully it's the purple Les Paul. Or do I already have one? But no, seriously, I don't have the purple, please. Sell me your purple. But as far as QC, I guess I am a little bit let down because there are some like bubbled areas in the lacquer as well. But hey, it was just kind of part of the times. And if it could look like this, when you look at it on a stand, this would be the ultimate guitar. Unfortunately, in person, it's just a little bit dark. It's only something that you're going to get to appreciate because the light really has to be on it for you to appreciate the figuring. And even then, the double staining job just doesn't let it dance as much as it could. Kind of a letdown in that aspect, but once you start playing this thing, you could care less that you got a figured maple neck and bat inlays. It's just a lot of fun. But alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed this spooky episode of the Trogly's Guitar Show, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next one. Take care.
If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day, and you might even enjoy this next one.